I it occurs to me this is a little bit dangerous, and the reason why it's a little dangerous is because it's currently it's 3 o'clock local time. Well, it's 3:21 local time here in Utah where I'm at, and the hours between 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock are the times when I'm the most drowsy. So you're gonna get you're gonna get the most drowsy Kyle that there probably is. But I was out in the shop and I was setting up this beta that I've got, doing some work on it. And I haven't put out a YouTube video for about a week. I mean, it's like I did a live drawing a little bit ago. We did the live drawing for the December sweepstakes back on Thursday. And what is it? Is it Tuesday today? So it's been, but I haven't like produced a YouTube video for a minute. And I'm like, maybe I should do a Q&A session. So here we are. So as you come in, let me know where you're coming from. Where you're at, like if you're in the States, let me know what state you're coming from. If you're international, let us know what country you're coming from. If it's a big town like, London, let us know. But yeah, so we've got Cole in here. We've got Dylan in here. Isaac is here. Dan is here. Christopher, we've got Blee. What is it? Blee 580. So Isaac is in from Idaho. And then, yeah, it's just as you're popping in, let's come up with some questions. We did get the December winners validated. Grant Gordon was the grand prize winner. He's from Colorado. And then we have Kurt Beck from Illinois. He was the runner-up winner, and they both have been validated by the sweepstakes administrator, Sweepstakes Pros. And so I'm working on getting that situated to get the bikes to them. I think Grant and I are going to meet up in a couple of weeks or week and a half or so, because he's not too far of a drive. If we both drive about 5 hours, we can get there. And then Kurt is coming, I think, sometime in March, all the way from Illinois. They were going to do like a skiing trip in Colorado or something. And so instead of shipping the bike to him, he's just going to come pick it up, which I think will be really cool. It's going to take a minute. But the bike's just going to sit in my shop and rest, waiting for him. Okay. So let's see if we got any questions here. Slade says, if you get a beta 450, I'll max out my entries. I have the beta 250. It's the one I'm setting up, the 250 RR, the standard version. That will be in the March sweepstakes. There will be that beta 250 RR and the KTM 250 XC. So those are the bikes that we'll have up for grabs in that. Let's see. Other questions. Bonjour, I'm from Canada, but I'm in Australia now for the winter. Yeah. This is DRS RSV. He chimes in with that. Con KH, do you have any good tips for a first timer redoing fork seals? It's a 2019 KTM 250 XCF. One of the reasons, like, I don't do any of my own suspension work. The more I've seen suspension work done, the more I just leave it to the professionals, because there's a lot of little things that they do if they're doing it every day. And I don't have any of the tools. So I would be looking for the tools. Like, there's a fork seating tool that you need. I don't have any of those tools. So I would just say, get the right tools. If you want to do it yourself, get the right tools for it. I'm sure there's a ton of like videos online in YouTube showing you how to do your fork seals. But for me, I usually, because I keep my bikes pretty clean, I usually don't get leaking fork seals. And if I do, I try one of those seal savers and try to get the dirt or debris out of there and see if I can get it to stop leaking. But usually if I do get a leaking seal, it's about time for the forks to be redone anyway, as far as fluids and things. And I just send it off, or I take it apart and send it to a shop that I trust here locally. So I don't do my own suspension work. I'll change suspension out. I'm doing that all the time, like as far as like swapping forks and swapping shock and things like that. But when it comes to like actually servicing the suspension, I just hire that out. That's what I do. Tanner Fingerboards, how is the 24 beta? I haven't even ridden it. It's still sitting in my shop. I put tubeless on it today. We've had crappy weather in Utah and I just haven't been able to get out. So I don't know yet. Let's see. John Graham, St. George, Utah is going to be 60 this weekend. Nice Saturday to ride. Need a shirt. Yes, it would be great. It would be a great weekend to ride. Unfortunately, I can't get down there this weekend, but it would be amazing. St. George is in southern Utah, and I need to get down there really soon for sure. Let's see. Christopher Harrison says, "Why am I having a lot of oil?" Oh, shoot. Why am I having a lot of oil coming out of my exhaust? It's a 23 KTM 300 XC. XEW? Should I be concerned? So in 23, the 300 XEW, that wasn't TBI, was it? Or TBI? I don't think it was. In 23, the XEW would have still been TPI. Typically, those didn't have a lot of oil coming out of the exhaust. The TBI, throttle body injection ones, a lot of times do because there's more oil. They run more oil in the TBI versions as far as the way that they're mapped. I don't know what the mapping is on your bike. If it's stock, they're usually fairly lean on the oil. If it's got some aftermarket ECU or something like that, they are more rich on the oil, and then you'll get more oil coming out of the exhaust. But it isn't a huge thing. Like if you don't have it running down the exhaust pipe, the silencer, and then dripping down onto your swing arm, I don't worry about it. Some of that is like how you're riding, like your riding style might be like slower where you're well, you might I shouldn't say slow. Your riding style might be where you keep the RPMs really low and you're lugging the bike all the time and it never has the chance to clean out or heat up or burn any of that unburnt or you get a lot of unburnt oil into the exhaust, into the silencer packing, and then it just starts to come out. And so it depends on what your riding style is. But what I would say is typically the TPI transfer port injection bikes, they were mapped pretty lean on the oil, and you wouldn't get a lot of oil coming out of the exhaust. TBI bikes have had a lot more oil coming out. It depends on if I'm on a slow ride or if I'm on a fast ride. If it's a faster, higher RPM ride, you typically don't see as much oil. Although this isn't always the case, because if you build up a lot of oil in there over 2 or 3 rides, and you're low RPMs and you build up a bunch of oil in that silencer, and then you have the next time you go out and you're just hammering it, sometimes you will be pushing a bunch of oil out of the silencer packing and it'll be like, what's going on? So it can be kind of confusing, so it's difficult for me to say. I'm just saying that there are multiple reasons that you might be having this. And without going and riding with you or seeing what you're talking about, it's hard to say for sure. SRAM number 156 says, "What's your thoughts on a Recluse clutch?" Man, you had to go there, didn't you? So I don't get as many emails as I used to in the past because I don't have like I'm not like prominently listing my my contact page on my website. So it's like I used to have this where it was one of the first things on the website. It was like, "Hey, ask a question." And I would get a lot of questions. Now you have to dig for it, and I don't get as many questions. But I used to get this so often, this like Recluse question, that I had a canned response to this. And I'll just essentially uh, articulate my canned response on Recluse auto clutch, because I assume you're talking about the auto clutch. When people say Recluse clutch, a lot of people don't even know Recluse makes manual clutches, and they make a really, really good manual clutch, extremely good. But most of the time when people are asking about the Recluse, they're talking about the auto clutch. And here's my thing. First off, let me say Recluse is a really cool company and they make a really cool product, and I like them as a company. But the auto clutch product is not something that I want. They're trying to solve a problem I don't want to solve, which is they're trying to make it easier to ride the motorcycle. And in some cases, like if you're going to have like a 450 4-stroke, it's the only bike that you want to ride or the only bike you can ride, and then you want to go ride that in technical terrain, and you don't want to want to kill yourself, then a Recluse auto clutch is going to be great because it's keeping the bike from stalling. Me personally, though, and every time I've tried one, and I've tried it dozens of times, I've never put one on the channel because like I don't have anything like super um what's the word? I don't want to tear down the company because I don't like it. But it's a good product made by a good company, but I don't want that product on my bike, and I don't. They're trying to solve a problem I don't want to solve, a problem I don't have or don't want to solve, which is make the bike easier to ride. When you get a Recluse, it's actuated by the RPMs. There's an engagement or a disengagement based on the RPMs, and it always feels like to me like there's 2 people running the clutch. So if you want to do like double blips into logs or double blips into like wall hits or things like that, it essentially doesn't really work. I know like some of the fanboys might argue and be like, yes, you can. I can double blip with my Recluse. And I'm like, no, you can't. You can't really do it. It takes some of it away because it's like two people are running the clutch at the same time and you're not always in sync. Double blipping and stuff. There's a reason why zero of these pro like hard enduro riders, every single motorcycle class I've ever gone to, every single pro I've ever talked to for training, they have all discouraged the use of auto clutches. But there is a specific demographic of people where I'm just like, this is going to be good for you. And that might be if you have carpal tunnel in your wrists, or you have some sort of like a really, really bad tennis elbow or something, which sometimes I struggle with, to where it's impossible for you to like use your fingers and actuate the clutch and things like that. Then if it's the only way for you to stay riding, I'm all for it. But if you're an able-bodied person, I'm like, if you need an auto clutch, it's probably because you're riding the wrong motorcycle. You don't need a if you want to do single track enduro stuff or whatever, like a lot of stuff that you see on my channel and some of these other channels, you should be riding a two-stroke most of the time. Especially if you're stalling the bike a lot on a four-stroke, then you're riding the wrong motorcycle. So instead of putting a Recluse on your 450 or your 350 or your 254 stroke, get a two-stroke and then you won't need a Recluse. See what I'm saying? There you go. Let's see. Matt S says, I found a 21 300 XCW. I'm thinking about buying. It's 149 hours and he'll give me the top end rebuild kit. Good deal. 8K Canadian he wants for it. I don't know what 8K Canadian is in US, but it's probably around $6,500. I'm not even sure. But it doesn't sound like a bad idea. 149 hours is probably right around the time to do a top end. There's a bunch of other things that you'd want to do. You'd want to go through suspension. It would need new oils unless he's done that relatively soon. Oils and the suspension depends on who you talk to. Like a suspension shop will say 20 hours. I don't think you should go more than 50 or 60 hours on the oil on your suspension. Some people do go 100 hours, but it's not great. So you're at the point where there's going to be a few things that probably need to be done. I don't think anything needs to be done with the bottom end of the bike, but you need to replace the oil pump. You need to replace the top end. You need to go through probably the oil and the seals in the forks and the shock. Brake pads may need to be replaced. It's highly likely, if this is the stock chain or even if it's the second chain, you might want to replace the chain and the sprockets on the bike. So, I mean, if let's just say it's $7,000 US, I don't know, but that might be a pretty good deal. These bikes are pretty expensive and they hold their value quite well. So I'm not in the market of buying and selling used bikes because I just buy the new bikes and then I give them away. It's been a while since I've sold a full size motorcycle. I will sell some of my kids' bikes and stuff, but I usually just sell them to friends and I'm not looking to like get top dollar out of them. But it might not be a bad one. Let's see. Randall Johnson says, I love KTM bikes. He's from Covington, Indiana. DRS RSV is watching from Adelaide, Australia. Isaac Edelmeyer, what are your thoughts on a 2024 KX250X? I think the last time I had the 250X was a 2021 model, and I don't know how much they've changed on it. I really did enjoy it. I probably didn't enjoy it as much as I enjoyed the Yamaha 254 stroke, because the 250X, the KX250X is essentially, it's a cross-country version of their motocross bike. Has the same gearing as their motocross bike, has maybe slightly softer valving than their motocross bike, and then it has a kickstand and an 18-inch rear wheel. Yamaha does this, Honda does this, Kawasaki does this, where they're basically just taking their motocross bike and just modifying a couple of things and saying it's a new model. I wish they'd make some additional changes to them. I wish it would have a 6-speed transmission. It doesn't. At least I don't think it does. The last time I looked at them, it didn't. And so it's a good bike. It depends on what you want to do with it. If you're doing like hair scrambles and faster riding in the desert or just places where you don't need, you're not going that slow, then it's going to be a fun bike. If you're going to be riding in conditions where the speeds are going to be slow, they're not as much fun. Any of the 4 strokes, but that'll be the deal. Click. Any chance you'll have the new Triumph dirt bikes on the channel? Yeah, there's definitely a chance. Like I want to um I would like to. I mean, I almost did the Stark Varg, but then they wanted me to pay for it like up front before it was even assembled and I was like I'm not doing that. But yeah, as some of these new bikes come in for sure. I definitely am interested in doing them. Finneran Racing, what is the best KTM for a 300-pound guy? Very torn between the 350 or the 450. Well, you didn't give me what you want to do with it. Okay. So um I'm I don't know what you want to do with it. But if you want to ride the type of terrain or things that I'm riding, then you should get a 302 stroke, not the 354 stroke, not the 450 four-stroke. You should get a 302 stroke. If you are saying and even if you wanted to go ride tracks, the 302 stroke would be a great idea. If you just wanted to ride tracks, I don't know what your background is though. I don't love getting a 454 stroke for anybody starting out, so Finneran, I don't have enough context to answer your question. Um, but the fact that you're on here asking that question leads me to believe that you probably don't have a ton of experience in motorcycles. And that leads me to lean again further away from the four strokes as a first-ish bike. And I would say get a 302 stroke. And you can ride that on the tracks, you can ride it on the trails, you can ride it in the desert, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Mike Mick says best light dual sport bike. I don't know. I don't do dual sports. We got Rusty in here from Texas. Randall Johnson says KTM 250XC, KTM oil injected. I don't know what the context was on that. Sorry. DRS says, ever ridden Canada or Australia? No, I have not. I lived in Canada for a couple of years, and I've been to Australia once for work. Richard Brower. So glad I caught you again. I'm not on my porcelain throne this time. I hope you have a great 2024. Looking forward to some more reviews. Lots of exciting bikes coming out. Let's see. Another guy that I can't. Okay, I don't know. I can't pronounce this person's like YouTube handle or whatever, but it says, hello, I'm 63 years old and I weigh 290 pounds. Is a PW 50 good for a starter bike? Okay, we all get that's a joke. Christopher Harrison says it's running down the exhaust pipe and dripping onto the swing arm. All stock, no mods. I ride mostly hardcore single track here in Colorado, typically at least 30. Okay, that he's the guy that was talking about, I think it was a 2023 KTM 300 XCW. I would look and see if your crankcase pressure sensors are shot. That sounds like way too much oil. That's way too much oil. If it's coming down and dripping onto the swing arm, then yeah, something's not right. It's getting way too much. So maybe check your CCPs, the crankcase pressure sensors, and just see on those because that's not normal. Nathan 400EX, you've said you started on ATVs before making the switch to dirt bikes. What were some of the challenges you faced when making the switch, and what kind of ATVs did you ride before? So when I was a kid, I rode all different types of four wheelers. We had like a Suzuki, like little Suzuki 230. It was a Suzuki 230. Anyway, it had no suspension, and then I had like a Yamaha Warrior, which is a four-stroke 350, more sporty type quad. When I got to be 16, 17, 18, I had a Yamaha Banshee, which is a 350 twin cylinder two-stroke. That was a fun four-wheeler. I was scared of the motorcycles because like my buddies were on these like two-stroke bikes that seemed like they were on-off switches, and I was scared of them. They were loud and scary, and the power was scary and things like that. But then making the switch to dirt bikes, the challenge that I had is I bought the wrong bike. I bought a frickin' 454 stroke. It was a 2009 YZ 450F, and it was way too much power and it was way too snappy. And I was riding it in nowhere it was designed to be. I'm riding on dirt roads and gravel roads and Jeep trails and stuff like that, and it sucked. So the problem I had starting out as a 30-year-old in motorcycles is I had the wrong tool for the job, the exact wrong thing. I couldn't have picked a worse dirt bike to start out with. And so that's the thing that I did for so many years, was just like encourage people to get the correct dirt bike and not buy 450s, because they almost killed me literally and figuratively. And so getting the right type of motorcycle that doesn't have too much power and is more fitted, more suited for what you want to do is the thing that I learned in the beginning. When I finally got a 302 stroke, and it wouldn't have had to been a 302 stroke, it could have been a 202 stroke or a 250. The point is, once I got something that was more suited to going slower and not ripping on a motocross track, then everything changed. And so that's what I've tried to constantly do is try to keep people from buying 454 strokes as their first motorcycles. It typically is the worst thing that you could possibly do in this sport. And that's what everyone wants to do because, if you're going to go get a truck, you just go get, the biggest, baddest truck ever and you ride it and you drive it down the street and you're cool. But that doesn't work that way with motorcycles. You don't need the biggest and baddest thing, and it's probably going to hurt you if you try to get that. Corey Moros says, Corey from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. My 2024 hard enduro 300 seems to backfire once in a while. Am I doing anything to cause it? This is difficult. I'd have to go ride with you, Corey, to know. Just know that two strokes don't always run smooth. So these bikes run smoother than ever, but they don't always run super smooth. And I feel like if you're coming over from a four stroke and you haven't had very many two strokes, a lot of times you're like diagnosing that there's something wrong with the motor, that there's nothing wrong with it. Sometimes they'll be like, well, it kind of runs a little bit rough. And I'm like, well, are you holding the constant throttle? Is this when you're like in between two trails, or you're riding it like 5 miles down the road and you're just holding constant throttle and it feels kind of jerky or whatever? That's what two strokes are. That's what they do. And so sometimes and I've had people where they're like, hey, I think something's wrong with my bike. Like it runs kind of weird. Can you ride it for me? And I ride it. I'm like, this runs perfect. And it's just because they're not used to how a two stroke works. So Corey, I'm not convinced that there's anything wrong with your bike. My suggestion is if you've got a buddy or some friends that have had some of these two strokes in the past, have some more experience with them where they've had two or three of them in the past, have them ride it and tell you if they think anything's wrong with it. If I was close to you and we were buddies, I'd absolutely, and we go out on a ride, if you're like, hey, can you ride this for 10 or 15 minutes and tell me what you think? Then I could give you a definitive answer. And it's highly likely that there's absolutely nothing wrong with it and it's running just like all the other two strokes. Christopher, yeah. So then Christopher Harrison or Colton says, what's up, bro? What are your top 5 movies? I don't know. I don't have a top 5. Let's see. David Phillips says from Georgia, TPI versus TBI. 300 XCW having trouble justifying 12K on a 2024, but haven't heard great things about the TPI. Would you go back to a TPI on a personal bike? Okay, so there's nothing wrong with TPI. There's a bunch of people that wanted to demonize KTM for the TPI bikes. And I'm not saying they're not without problems, but so are all the freaking Yamahas and Hondas and Kawasaki's and Betas and Shercos. All of these manufacturers, some of these motors don't run as good as others. But people just wanted to like crucify KTM for TPI and it's talking about how bad it was or how bad it is. It wasn't bad. They ran amazing. They were incredible. TPI was incredible. And so if you've got a TPI bike and you're like, hey, should I upgrade? I'm like, well, how many hours does it have? Like, are you ready to upgrade? Don't upgrade to TBI just because you think it's better. I do think TBI, throttle body injection, is the second generation, and I do think it has some certain advantages. However, I don't like the frames as much. So I prefer, like if you have a 2023 XCW or a 22 XCW, I prefer that frame over the 24 XCW. So I like the motor on the XCW in the 2024. I have to keep thinking about it. I like the motor of the 2024 XCW, which is a TBI, but I prefer the frame on the older gen. So no, I don't think it's worth like upgrading in that case. So the main thing is find a good deal on a good bike. If it's TPI, I can live with that. If it's TBI, I can live with that. I wish that we'd go back. I wish we could go back to the old frames that they had and give us the TBI motor with the old frame because it got too stiff in 2023 on the XC and 2024 on the XCW. The frames are too stiff, but the TBI KTM 300 XCW has the best fork I've ever used as far as on a stock dirt bike. So it's not just as simple as TPI versus TBI. There's a lot of other factors in it, and they both have their good points. Your TBI motor, I think, is better. It's a step up. Your TBI suspension, because it's now a closed, well, depends on the year, but 2024, it's a closed cartridge spring fork that is awesome. It's amazing, but I don't like the frame as much. I don't get as much rear end traction. So there you go. Let's see. Owen Usher, as a Canadian, how can I enter to win a bike? Unfortunately, you can't, Owen. Like I can't do it because I have to be able to give product to you and I can't ship it across the border without losing money. And I can't award a prize across international borders. That was even pre-COVID. After COVID, it's even worse. I would have to offer a cash prize to Canadians, which is a possibility. But the problem is this: getting product to you. I have to be able to ship you a product in order for it to be legal, like a shirt, and it costs way more than the cost of the shirt to even ship it to you. And then I have them get caught up in border like customs. I had that happen to me. I tried it for a little while, and as much and I would love it. It would be great, but I just can't. It doesn't make commercial sense to me. I would have to have another warehouse in Canada and like look, so I could like put a bunch of product over there, and then if you buy it from there, then I ship it to you. It doesn't make sense monetarily. I'm barely making it on these sweepstakes as it is now, and every single time I make less money on them. Like the profit margins get slimmer and slimmer, and I cannot afford it. Would crush me. You're sitting there thinking, well, I would, I would make money because it's all of Canada. But one thing Canadians forget is Canada is smaller than California, and California is as far as a population goes. So I love Canadians. I love and like Canada punches above its weight class as far as like viewership and stuff on my channel and things like that. Um, but it would kill me to offer this in Canada. It would literally sink the sweepstakes because I'm not a huge corporation. I'm just one guy with a limited budget, and these things are expensive. And so I can't, unfortunately, offer them to Canada. I know some of these other bigger sweepstakes do it, but they do it on a cash prize. And I don't know how they get their product up there. I don't know how they ship shirts or goods or up to Canada without losing their shirt. I don't know how they do it. But I lost money on it every time I sent something up there, and lost money big time. It cost me a lot of money to try to put stuff up in Canada, unfortunately. Um, what do you think? So Cooper Kish, Cole Bryant says, how do you feel about a Suzuki DRZ 125L for a 12-year-old? They're fairly big and they're fairly heavy. That's the thing. My boys wouldn't want to ride it because they're big and heavy and kind of slow. But it depends. I don't know I don't know what this son or daughter is like. Maybe they're bigger where they could handle the weight. Maybe they don't want something like a fire breathing dragon. I'm just telling you, like I got a 13-year-old and he wouldn't want to ride it. I have a CRF 120. I have a Honda 125F, which is a similar thing to what this Suzuki DRZ 125 is. And my boys just like to bomb it around the neighborhood, but they don't want to ride it as like a real dirt bike. Cooper Kirsch says, what do you think of the 2023 CRF 250RX? I think it's a great bike. Again, it's pretty much just like that KX that we were talking about before. It's only got a 5-speed transmission, which isn't ideal. They essentially took their motocross bike and put an 18-inch wheel on it and put a little bit softer suspension and put a kickstand on it. They did the very least that they possibly could, and then they say, hey, here's a new motorcycle. And it's fine, like it's good. And if you're going to ride faster terrain, it'll be great. If you're going to ride slower terrain, you're going to struggle with it because it's a 4-stroke high compression motor and they want to go fast. MP2 says, Kyle, Mike from Michigan, heard serious updates on the Beta 300 or the Beta 390RR. Love to see comparison to the Sherco 300. I haven't had the Beta 390. If I end up loving this 250RR, maybe I'll get another Beta right after it and do the 390, because the last time I did the 390, it's been 5 model years. It was the 2019, and I loved the Beta 390. Back in the day, it was really great. DRS, why do you recommend a 302 stroke for novices? Well, it's because they don't stall. Let that sink in. Let me say it one more time. 302 strokes don't stall. One of the biggest challenges that people have, and it depends on if you're big. Like, I'm not saying I'm recommending a 300 to every single person. What I'm saying is, if you're like a 30-year-old man or a 40-year-old man, yeah, it'd be cool for you to start on a 125 two-stroke. Probably the best of all worlds would be a 200 two-stroke, but most people aren't willing to do that. Their ego and their pride is too big. They're like, "I need something with more power. Look, I've ridden a Harley and whatever." And, I can't convince these people to get a 125, and I can't convince them to get a 200. But a lot of times I can convince them to get a 300 two-stroke and the bike doesn't stall, and there's no way that they you can't grow out of it. Like, you can want something else, but no one, no one within the sound of my voice can squeeze all the capability out of a 300 two-stroke, evidenced by Graham Jarvis or any of these other, like, hard enduro riders or whatever. They're not even squeezing all the capability out of these motorcycles. They keep finding new things that they can do with them and new limits that these motorcycles have. So, you're never gonna outgrow a 300 two-stroke, never, not possible. It's not even in the conversation. But it's also not gonna frustrate the hell out of you by stalling all the time. You're a brand new rider and you're trying to learn some of these things, some of these skills, you're doing some slower stuff. You're riding a 254 stroke, 354 stroke, heaven forbid a 454 stroke, they're stalling like that. They're stalling so easily because on a four stroke, they're only making power to the piston's only making power every other time. Every fourth time it goes through every other time it comes to the top, it's making power. Yeah, because you've got the power stroke down, and then you have the exhaust stroke coming out, you have the intake stroke going down, and the compression and ignition stroke going up. So when you're on a four stroke, if it's 4,000 RPMs, it's only making power 2,000 times a minute. On a two stroke, it's making 2,000 times. It's making power 2,000 times per minute at idle at 2,000 RPMs. So they're making power twice as often, two stroke versus four stroke. And I understand not every stroke on a two stroke is making as much power as the strokes on a four stroke, but because the four stroke, it's just basically operating at a lower RPM all the time, you know? And so it has a tendency to stall so much easier. You have to keep the RPMs so much higher on a four stroke to keep it from stalling. You have to be so much better on your clutch control, feathering the clutch. Otherwise, that bike will stall on that exhaust stroke or somewhere in the ignition stroke when it hasn't made power for like all these, 270 revolutions of the crank. It hasn't made power. And because it's a single cylinder engine, it takes a bit. So they stall so much easier than a two stroke. And that is so frustrating for riders is to stall these motorcycles. And so it's just easier. And so and then your next question, isn't it too much? It depends on the rider. So if you're a brand new kid, like my kids have been riding for 10 years and they don't ride 302 strokes. They're kids. But if you're a 40-year-old dude, um, is it too much? We can make that argument, but it's so much better than you going out and buying a 450. Most of the people are going out there and buying the wrong bike. They're buying a 454 stroke. It's the best selling bike across any brand because it's like, oh, this is, and so it's way easier than a 454 stroke. It would be better if we started on 125s, but I can't get most people to do that. And then also people feel like they grow out of a 125. They don't really. But look, I have more fun riding a 252 stroke and I have more fun riding a 302 stroke than I have riding a 125. So it's difficult for me to tell a full grown man who's 200 pounds to get a 125 because then he's going to be pissed at me because he's going to think it's not enough bike, you know? So I pick and choose my battles. I've done this for a hot minute. I've had these conversations thousands of times. And it sounds weird to say that, but I have had it thousands and thousands of times on the phone, email, in person, all the things. I know I can't convince the general public to get a 125 two stroke. If they're a teenager, I probably can. I can make a pretty good argument. But if you're 25 to 65, it's a losing battle in the general populace for me to try to get you to get a 125 two stroke or a 200 two stroke. But I can typically convince you to get a 300, and that is a sweet spot. So there's your answer. Let's see. MP2 said, Kyle, I meant to say Sherco 300 four-stroke compared to the Beta. Well, I knew that's what you meant. A Sherco 300 four-stroke compared to the Beta 390 RR. It would be really cool. Here's what I'll say in the past about what I've known about those bikes. If I rode only single track, um, and I was going to ride a four stroke, those would be the two that I'd want, either the Sherco 300 SEF, which is the four stroke, or the Beta 390 RR. But here's how I would characterize it. If I'm going to ride mountain single track only, I take the Sherco 300. If I'm going to mix in with some desert, I take the Beta 390 RR. That's how I feel about it. But they're both awesome. Cameron Schuff says, I did the same thing after 2 years, dropped down to a 250F. So I'm assuming he dropped down from a 450 down to a 250. Let's see. Matt S. Seems like I'd have to dump a decent chunk into the 21. The dealership here has the 23 XCWs and 250s on for 11,000 Canadian. So probably 9K for us, I guess, in the US. If I'm not going to save much used, I might as well go new. Thanks. I've been torn. Well, and this is the thing, Matt, that I always go back to. These bikes always depreciate, and you're going to lose money by buying it new. You're going to lose more money by buying it new than you would by buying a used bike, because you get you take the sticker shock value or whatever it is, like driving it off the lot and stuff like that. But if you're buying used, you're engaging in a part-time job to go out there and find that bike and find it online and haggle with the owner and drive to see multiple bikes and all that stuff. So you're spending resources either way. If you buy it new, you can just call around, find a dealer that has one, and then go down there and pick it up, write the check for whatever it is. If you want to buy it used, you're searching online for however long, and then you're going and visiting these bikes in person and checking them out and whatever. And that is a resource too. That's your time. So you're either going to spend your money resources or your time resources, but in the end, all these motorcycles are expensive anyway. And so I've typically bought new because of that, because I'm like, you're either going to spend the money in your paycheck or your dollars, or you're going to spend the money in your time. And time is more valuable to me than money. They're both valuable. Money's valuable, obviously, but my time is even more valuable than my money. There you go. Chris Lutton, have you tried the South Bay tune via head via Australian's two-stroke performance? KTM's stock tune is for emissions and starves a cylinder of oil. This fixes and transforms the bike. Yes, I've tried these things. How do I say this? On the TPI bikes, they were starving for oil. Okay. Well, I shouldn't say starving. On the TPI bikes, what I'll call first gen, they were lean on oil. I wouldn't say they were starving for oil. They were lean on oil. I ran some of these bikes over 100 hours, never had a single problem. So if they were, quote, starving for oil, they wouldn't have been able to go that long without a failure. So I'm uncomfortable with you saying that they were starving the cylinder of oil. And then saying, well, these aftermarket tunes fix that. Well, how do they fix it if there wasn't really a problem? Some of these, and then on the TBI bikes, they're definitely not being starved for oil. They're not being starved. I've had so many of them. They're certainly not being starved for oil, and they're not even lean on oil. So these aftermarket companies, and there's a number of them, I don't want to name them all by name, but these aftermarket companies, here's what they do. And this is America, so more power to you. I believe in capitalism, whatever. But what they will do, and I'm sorry to have to say this, and this pisses some of them off, but my job is to tell you what I really think. Some of these companies invent problems with these bikes, and then magically, they also have the solution. They're trying to sell a product, so they invent a reason to sell the product and tell you that you need it because your $10,000, $12,000 dirt bike, as soon as you get it, they are going to tell you it's deficient and it runs like a piece of shit. And guess what? Magically, we have the answer. And some of these companies will basically tell you that their aftermarket product solves everything, and it also cures kids of cancer. And so not only is it going to make your bike run perfect, because your bike, like what their messaging is, Some of them is your messaging is your $12,000 bike is a piece of garbage. It runs like crap until you buy this thing from me, and then it will run like crazy. It'll be amazing after you buy this $300 to $2,000 upgrade from my company. That bugs me because I've had so many of these bikes. I'm like, these problems don't actually really exist. You're either fear mongering people, or you're greatly out exaggerating a thing, or you're bold face lying. And I've seen it all ways. I've seen it all of the different ways. And so, and yes, I've tried that exact head you're talking about. I've tried these things. I've tried them on my bikes. I've tried them on other people's bikes. And here's what I'll say. They all these aftermarket ECUs, all these aftermarket heads, they do make the bike run different. But I'm uncomfortable saying that they make the bike run better because I don't always agree with that. They do make it run slightly different, but better is totally in the eye of the beholder. And here's what usually happens, Chris, and I hope I don't offend you with that, with what I'm about to say. But because you've spent $1,000 on this head or whatever it is, ECU and head combination, you're looking for confirmation bias that this is better. And so you buy it and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so much better. Look, like cool, because you want to justify the purchase. And so now you're biased wanting it to work, because if it doesn't make the bike better, then what that says is that you made a mistake. Somewhere in your psyche, in your ego is bruised by this. If you spent $1,000 or $1,500 and it didn't make your bike better, that's an attack on your manhood or your ego or whatever. And so then you will manufacture reasons in your head why it's better. I'm not saying, Chris, that you do this, but I'm saying I know this happens. I've talked to thousands of you, and I know this happens. I've had so many conversations about these things. I'm convinced of it. And there's nothing you can do to convince me otherwise, because I've had the conversation so many times, and this is what I've done for 10, 12 years. So some of these products are good, but some of them are not even any better than stock. And sometimes they're not even an upgrade at all from stock. But one thing is for sure, one thing is for certain with these products: your pocketbook will be lighter. You'll be $1,000 less rich. Will your bike be better? Will it be faster? Will it get better fuel economy? Will it have more power? That's a different discussion. It will be different, but will it be better? I have had enough of these products that I'm uncomfortable saying that it's better. I don't know that they are. Everyone, sometimes a product is better. But what also I think is kind of funny is I've met with these I don't have like any affiliation with KTM, Yamaha, Gas, Honda. Yamaha invited me next month to go to this press event they're doing, and I'm going to go to that. But I have no affiliation with any of these companies. But I've now rubbed shoulders with enough of these people to see how much R&D is going into these decisions that they make on the bikes, and why they're making decisions on these motors, and why they put this head on there versus other heads. And they have $1 million budgets. Okay. And sometimes they are just making these things for emissions things. Like some emissions does come into it. That was part of your question. But here's how this looks. Sometimes you've got these big companies that are making these, they've got whole teams of people, and they've been working on this one problem and refining this motor and this power curve or whatever for 20 years. And then one dude in a shop with a CNC machine comes out, and 12 minutes after the motor has been released, he gets the very first one down there, throws it on a dyno, and says, I'm going to invent a problem for this thing. And then he carves out a new head, shape, a dome shape, and says, look, I've solved all the problems. And he does it in literally, I'm exaggerating just slightly here, but they do it in a matter of days. They've figured out, some of these shops are literally going, I'm one dude in a shop with a CNC machine, and I figured out how to make it better than KTM did, or Yamaha did, or Gas, or Honda did. I figured this out better than them. I'm so much smarter than them here in my shop with my CNC machine. And I know a teeny bit of code, and I did some things and I like changed a little bit of the fuel mapping. And now I figured out how to like reprogram your ECU. And I think if I put just a little bit more gas right here and a little bit less gas right here, that's going to be better. My thing is, bro, these guys, there's a bunch of people smarter than you that have been doing this for 20 years and been massaging this thing out. And they've done it for a reason. It's a give and take with these things. So you think you've made a better head or you think you've made a better ECU, but it's a give and take. If you put some power here, you take some power here away, that doesn't necessarily make it better for all riders. And so, man, I know I've gone down the rabbit hole on this, but like it isn't better oftentimes. And transforming the bike, I'm very uncomfortable to say that any of these products transform the bike. I have yet to see a single product that I've ever done on this channel in all the times that I've done it. I've never really seen anything that, quote, transforms the bike, especially not an electronic control unit, ECU, or a head. They do change the bike, but do they transform it? You and I have different definitions of the word transform. And I'm spending my own money on this stuff too. So I don't have to say anything. Like there was a company a couple weeks ago, every week, somebody's like, hey, can I send you this thing? I'm like, no, you can't. But can you send me some information on it? And if I'm interested in it, I'll buy it. And that way I can say whatever I want about it. There was like one of the more recent things was like that Baja no pinch tool. It's like this no pinch tire tool. I did a video on it. They wanted to send me one and they wanted to like, hey, why don't we work together and all this stuff? I bought the thing and I'm just like, yeah, I've seen this tool being used for years and years and years. And then I bought it. And I'm like, this isn't moving the needle. This isn't transforming tire changes. It's just another thing to do. And typically these heads and these whatever, they don't transform the bikes. Like if you spend a few minutes tuning some of these things, you can make it run just as good or better than their upgraded ECU or their upgraded head. And even then, is more power always the answer? No, it's not. So anyway, it was a lengthy, and this isn't an attack on you at all, Chris. It's just you asked a question that I've had thousands and thousands of times, and I've seen these parts and these quote upgrades to the bike, and like, man, I'm really hesitant to call any of these things upgrades. They're aftermarket things, but people say like aftermarket upgrades. It's almost like the two words are connected. Aftermarket and upgrade, they're like hand in hand. Like I don't think they're hand in hand anymore. There's aftermarket and there's upgrades, but they're very few and far between. Upgrades are far apart. Aftermarket is easy. To make it better than what the manufacturer has done, that's a different thing. Wow, went down the rabbit hole on that. Okay, we've gone for 47 minutes. Let's see. I got the 24 pause for my son. Let's see. Here's one. Okay. Storm Younger says, Montana, your thoughts on lowering a bike or just lowering a bike or just lower a purchase bike. Okay. So your thoughts on lowering a bike, lower or just purchase a bike that fits. Depends on who we're buying it for, Storm. I do think you want to purchase a bike that fits. The problem with lowering a bike is typically you're changing the geometry and they usually don't ever go. You're giving up capability of the bike. So it depends on how short you are too. So I get some of these people who are 5'8", 5'9", 5'10", and ask if they should lower the bikes. And I say, no, don't. Just stand up on the pegs and realize that you only have to put one foot down at a time. We don't need both feet down. It can help in certain situations to be able to paddle through stuff. But typically speaking, you don't need to have both feet down at the same time. And so, excuse me, but if you're 5'4", it's pretty dang tough to ride a full-size motorcycle if you're 5'4", you know. But if you're a kid and you're 5'4", maybe we just keep you on a KX80 or a YZ80 for a little bit longer until you get to be 5'5", 5'6". Then you can start to handle these full-size motorcycles. But if you know you're never going to get over 5'5", or you know you're never going to go over 5'2" or 5'3", then we're probably going to have to look at lowering a bike for you. And this is where Beta comes in, because Beta bikes are already an inch lower, and then they offer a low boy kit from the factory, and now it's 3 inches lower. It's like basically a factory lowering kit, and it's pretty awesome. So that seems to be a really good solution for a lot of people. Moto Film 619. How do you feel about KTM 350 XCFs? I think it sounds perfect on paper. The 350s, and I've said this a lot, the 350s sound perfect on paper, but here's what I've typically found. The 350s tend to feel like a watered down 450 to me and a heavy 250. So if you make me choose and you say, well, would you rather have a 350 or a 450? I will take the 350. But if you ask me, would you rather have a 250 or a 350? I'll take the 250. So again, that 350 looks perfect on paper, but I've never really loved them in practice when I've ridden them. They're pretty cool. Um, but I'd rather have a 250 than the 350 four-stroke. Um, let's see. See if I just take a couple more questions here because I've been going for 50 minutes. Let's see. 350, 300, two strokes all the way. Just looking for an interesting question here. I'm sorry I do this towards the end, but I want to lead. I want to like end on kind of a high note. Here's a good one. FN Flame, first affordable two-stroke for a 15-year-old beginner. That's a YZ 125, buddy. Or if you could find a YZ 125X, that is the best two-stroke for a 15-year-old beginner. They're plentiful. It's a motocross bike that you can easily modify to make it a little bit better for single track riding or even just track riding. They're fantastic. There's a million of them. There's a million upgrades for a YZ 125. A million of them. It is a kickstart bike, but that means it'll be cheaper and it'll be lighter. And so, best affordable two-stroke for a 15-year-old beginner, YZ 125 or the YZ 125X. The X already has an 18-inch rear wheel. It already has a kickstand and maybe a little bit bigger fuel tank. But yeah, those are the bikes. Last question. Greetings from Massachusetts. What's the best time of the year to ride in Utah? Anytime except for February, January and February. And you can ride here all year round. You just have to ride in the southern part of the state when we're in the winter. Any interest in testing the Triumph or Ducati MX bikes? Yeah, I do. I'm not a big MX tester, but eventually it'd be fun to get one. Oh, so here's Chris. Here's Chris, the guy that I gave the long, lengthy answer to, and he probably put this in halfway through my answer. He says, "Thanks for the response. From experience with the tuning, my 2020 TE300, 400 hours on its second cylinder. Not offended, just trying to avoid another cylinder. So anything with that many hours, like 400 hours on, I mean, yeah, you may be time for a whole new top end. I don't know, or at least having your cylinder replated or something like that." Um, Yeah. Jason P. Usually, if you're trying to make an engine faster or better, it takes multiple parts to complement one another. It's usually just not one bolt-on part that makes a big difference at all. I would totally agree with that as well. Um, let's see if there's any other like interesting questions in here. Jason P. That's the point. If it's better for that rider, then make all the mods he wants to his bike. That's all that matters. And I would also agree with that, Jason. Like if you like, that's the other part is like if you want it and you think it's better, go for it. But where I get uncomfortable is I don't want to contribute to the notion that there's anything quote inherently wrong with these bikes and that there's something that you have to spend. You just spent $10,000 to $13,000 on these bikes, and then you got to like something's wrong with it, and you got to like do something to fix it. I do not want to play into that narrative at all because I know it's a false narrative. But if somebody like me or whatever is like, hey, look, I got to do this super awesome upgrade, 18, anywhere from $400 to $2,000 to make this motor run right, I don't want to contribute to that at all. David Deming, because I don't believe it. David Deming, any interest in trying a Mako 360 bar mount? I have one out in the shop. I've tried it. I've used it before. I I want to try some different like inserts for it. And so I have like some softer, they have the shark bite in there and the different like polymers and stuff. And I just haven't seen like a huge, it just, some people swear by them, but it's an expensive bar mount. And you can put different polymers in there and it kind of helps take maybe some of the shock out of it or whatever. But That's another one. I'm just like, I don't know what to say about this because like it's not really moving the needle for me and it's big and it's expensive. It's like $300, $400. I don't know. I don't know. I have it out in my shop. Maybe I'll put it on another bike, but it's kind of a pain to install, and it hasn't been that interesting to me. And I've tried it once. Um, Apprehensively YOLO. Hey Kyle, I've always wondered how many hours you put on a giveaway bike. Lately, it seems like you only have them for a month or two, and it felt like in the past you had the bike for 4 to 6 months. Yeah, it just depends on the bike. And now that I'm doing these, I do the giveaways like quarterly. They definitely don't have as many hours on them. Typically these giveaway because I'm not riding as much as I want to, and I'm not riding as much as I did in the past. And B, when you're splitting time on 8 bikes in a year, you don't put that many hours on them. So they have these giveaway bikes have anywhere between some of them have had as little as 5 hours on them, and others have had around 20, 25. But I think on average, recently, most of them have only had about 15 hours on them. So they're very low hours on these giveaway bikes. Whereas in the past, some of them would have, I mean, some of them had 100. Others would have 50. But now I'm not riding as much and I'm splitting time on all these bikes. I get a short amount of time with them. Like the beta will not have that many hours on it. And neither will the 250XC because they have 0 hours on them. And we're most of the way through January. And so, yeah, they won't have a ton of hours on them for sure. Well, this is an interesting question. Nick Silvestri, what was your worst day out riding? And was it better than your best at your old job? Nick, oh my gosh, this is a poignant question. I've been fighting burnout on this new job here. Every job has its challenges. Um, a lot of things have gotten to me about doing this job, and this dirt bike channel. I've been so thankful for it. It has been like I can't even tell you. Like I'd if I really got into it, I would be sobbing. Like how grateful it is I've been to that I've been able to do this. But at the same time, there are other parts of it that are really taxing emotionally and mentally and things like that. So my worst day riding is not better than my best day at my old job. I had some really good times at my old job. I was an enterprise sales guy at a technology company, and I had some really good times there, and it was a lot of fun. But I will say, like, this has been a really good gig, and the worst days out riding are bad. It's easy for me to say, like, I would much rather have a bad day on the dirt than a good day in the snow. Like, people are like, "Oh, you need a snow bike, and you're right, you must have had the wrong people with you," and all this stuff. I don't have that much fun in the snow. I don't have that much fun snowmobiling. I don't have much fun snow biking. I don't even really like to ski anymore. I used to as a kid, but I do have more fun on the dirt. And I have a ton of I always have had more fun on a dirt bike than I have on like snow sports and things like that. But it's pros and cons like with this gig. And I don't know. I don't know. I may change it up. Because it's getting harder and harder to make ends meet with it, especially where I'm a single dad and I don't have the emotional support that I used to have. Like, um, you guys like I don't talk bad about my ex-wife. My ex-wife is an amazing person, and I would never do on a public forum. I would never like say, "Well, here's, what was going on between us." But I will give her credit to say that like one of the things that like I didn't even know she was doing was she was giving me a level of emotional support that I was completely oblivious about. Okay, like emotional support for this business and for this thing that I'm doing. Uh, and then, us going through the divorce and everything, it seemed like in my head, it was like, well, you can continue to do this because it wasn't like she wasn't working the business with me. She was running the household and doing all the stuff, and doctor appointments and I was involved, with the kids. I would go to, but she was doing the lion's share of the household stuff, and I was doing all of the Dirt Bike Channel business stuff. And so I thought that um, it would be it would be no different, I guess is what I'm saying. I thought it would be no different doing it alone as a single man, because I was doing it all as a married man. And while that's true on most of the levels, one of the things that was happening is every day I had somebody who was providing emotional support to me that I didn't even know. I was totally oblivious to it. So as now, my divorce has been final for about 2 years, and then I moved we split before that. I'm running on 2.5 years now of very little emotional support, at least from a spouse/partner. And, it's difficult to describe the, um, the mental toll that that takes on a person. So, if you haven't gone through it, you wouldn't know. But, yeah, it's like, I'm thankful for this gig and this opportunity that I've been able to do, and it's been super fulfilling to be able to help people, um, and even just, like, give motorcycles to people. Uh, Most people have never had that experience to where it's like, "Hey, here's this prize that's worth anywhere from 10 to 14 or $30,000." Like, we gave a dirt bike away last year to a guy when we had 30 grand in that sucker, and it's one of a kind. And my buddy Tyler built the thing, and those are amazing experiences. And those are things those and some of those people are so grateful to you, and you've, like, changed their lives, and they will some of them even still message me or text me and say, "Hey, here's what's happening with that bike, and look, I raced this series with it, or we did this trip here," and they're sending pictures of them on this motorcycle, and, that's not something I had at my previous job, like, I sold SSL certificates to companies like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and a million other companies that nobody's ever heard of, and those guys aren't reaching out to me. Like, nobody reaches out to me and says like, "Hey, Kyle, 20 years ago, you cleaned my carpet, and I'm so, happy about that." Or 10 years ago, "Kyle, you sold me these SSL certificates." They don't give a shit. Like, it doesn't matter. But the people who, like, you give dirt bikes to, or the people who you have helped in some way, with their hobby, with their passion, those people they're appreciative and they stick around longer. And it means something to them. And that's where this has been really fulfilling, is just like those experiences that you have. A couple weeks ago we were down at Supercross at Anaheim 1, and I just, had a couple people come up and talk to me, and they're so excited. Like, some of them are so excited to talk to me. And it's weird, because I'm just a regular guy, but, like, maybe they've been watching the videos for a while, or maybe I helped them, they feel like I kept them from making a mistake or something like that. And I'm not saying everybody agrees with me. You don't have to agree with me, but some of this stuff resonates with people. And so if you make a connection with somebody online, like, they feel like they're connected to me, and or maybe you might feel like you're connected to me because we've had shared experiences or whatever. It's really humbling as me on the other side, because I'm not aware of any of this like you are. It's almost like with some of us, you have a personal relationship with me that I'm not fully aware of yet. And then we meet in person, and I can feel that. Like, I can feel that energy from you. And that's pretty damn humbling. And so there's some really cool parts about the gig, but then there's some other things where it's a grind, man. And you just feel like some of the time you feel like you're answering the same questions over and over. And then some of the time it's just like you get so much scrutiny, so much scrutiny. Like, there was something, I posted a video recently and I said something, and then I had somebody just like, blowing me up going, "You have no idea," and they know me. And I'm just like, ah, in regular life, you wouldn't have people reaching out to you like that, criticizing you. And it's one of the reasons why I almost never read comments on YouTube. I almost never read comments on Instagram, is because there's always that one guy or that other guy who just wants to run you down. And so you're avoiding it, but you're avoiding it. And everyone will be like, "Oh, don't worry about those people." Well, yeah, I try not to worry about those people. But over time, all over time, that negativity has a cumulative effect on you, to where the negativity is just below the surface. And there's a bunch of people like kind of sorry to use the but shitting on you. And although most of it maybe comes out of some sort of a jealousy or whatever, that negative energy does actually have a way of like permeating your barriers, you know? And it takes its toll over time. And at certain parts of my life, I've been better at handling it, and I don't listen to it, and I don't say this to get a bunch of messages to people like, "Oh, keep your head up," and whatever. I've had so many of those too. Like, I know, keep your head up. You can do hard things, all this stuff. But at the end of the day, um, over the course of more than a decade in quote social media, which I'm kind of in, kind of out, just kind of I just have lost my appetite for social media, where it's like, look at my Instagram. I hardly ever post on there because I just don't want to go to it. Like I just kind of like avoid it. I'm like, oh, I guess I should post something on Instagram. Oh, I guess I should post something on YouTube. Um, and that's kind of where I'm at. It's just like I still love the motorcycles. I still go out to my shop. Like I was out in my shop a few minutes ago, and I'm like, I feel so blessed. Like I don't know if I can continue to make the payments on this house and shop, but I do feel so blessed because it's in January, and I'm able to go out to the shop and turn on the heat beforehand. And I've got like my AirPods in my ears, and I'm listening to a book on tape, and I'm putting tubeless on this beta, and then I'm like putting my changing the grips out on it and looking at this beautiful motorcycle, and I'm like, this is pretty incredible. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon in January, and I'm in a nice warm shop, and I'm working on motorcycles, and I'm doing this. This is part of what I'm going to do for, this will be a revenue stream in a couple months when I start the sweep, or, a month and a half when I start the sweepstakes for this bike. And I'm going to give this away eventually to somebody. And it's pretty dang cool. But at the same time, there are some other parts of it where it just grinds at you and it wears at you. And if you don't have any like emotional support from a good woman because your marriage ended, like that takes a toll on you. And then dating is like its own personal part-time job, and it takes so much out of you. And yeah, it's just there's a lot. And then I'm trying to be a dad. I've got 4 kids. And when the kids are here, it's a lot. It's a lot. And then this last weekend, my 6-year-old was sick, and so it took like all of my time and all of my effort to like take care of this little girl who needs her dad. And then you come out of that and you're just drained. And then it's Monday morning, the kids have gone back to their moms, but I'm completely emotionally and physically drained from the weekend. And then it's like, oh, get up and like, oh, let's make a YouTube video that people are gonna like um criticize you for because you said something wrong, or like that's not the best way to do it, and you're such a dummy. Like, don't you know this? And it's like that gets to you. Anyway, that was a long-winded answer. We gone 1 hour 7 minutes. Still 100 of you on. If you want to support what we're doing here, best way probably to do it is to use my links to Rocky Mountain ATV. Rocky Mountain ATV is the best in the business. Um, And if you go to dirtbikechannel.com, you can click up there. There's one of the menu items is Shop Rocky Mountain ATV. When you click on that, you can then buy anything they sell. So if you're buying tires, parts, gear, please use that link. Won't cost you a dime, but it will definitely make a difference in my life. Um, and yeah, and it's a great partnership with those guys. They can't be beat on price, they can't be beat on service or selection or any of those things. So click that link. It's also in the links are also in the description of basically every one of my YouTube videos. So when you're buying anything, please use my links for Rocky Mountain ATV. If you're buying something on Amazon, I have an Amazon link. There's links on my website. There are links in usually all my videos. But if you even click on, I think it's shoot, where is it? Oh my gosh, I've forgotten my website. I have Amazon links on my heck. Can't even find it over here. I probably need to make that a little bit more prominent on my website, don't I? Because I used to know where that was. But anyway, thanks so much from the bottom of my heart for supporting all of this stuff. Don't buy anything on my website until March because that's when it'll get you entered to win a couple other dirt bikes, Beta 250 and a KTM 250. But do use my links for Rocky Mountain ATV here in January and in February. And then in the sweepstakes, anytime you click on those links for Rocky Mountain ATV, it's also going to get you entered in to win the bikes. And I have a little secret for you. Um, one of the guys, I can't remember if it was Gordon or Kurt, but one of the because I can look and see. Um, those one of those dudes won that motorcycle not because he bought something off my website. He won it because he clicked on the link. Now he had purchased something from me before. I can't remember if it was Gordon or Kurt, but I kind of I was like, doing some research and looking at it. Like one of those dudes did not purchase something off my website during the sweepstakes. They used the link to Rocky Mountain ATV, and that's how they ended up becoming a finalist and ultimately winning that dirt bike was by clicking on that Rocky Mountain ATV link. It really does work. Um, and he got a motorcycle because he decided to go to my website and click on shop Rocky Mountain ATV. So, and that he's not the only one. I've given multiple motorcycles now to people, and the way they won was by clicking on that link for Rocky Mountain. So, if that isn't a good reason for you to use the link, I don't know what is. It's going to give you a good feeling because you'll know I'll make between 4 to 6 cents on the dollar. That's what it is. It depends on the product that you buy. And I might make 4 cents on a buck. I might make 6.5 cents on a buck. Some of the Tusk products I might make even 7 cents. I can't remember. Point is, I'm making around 6 cents on the dollar. So if you spend $100 with Rocky Mountain ATV, I'll probably make about $6 by a referral for sending you over there. So please go ahead and do that. Every dollar counts so much now more than ever. Appreciate you guys. And until next time, leave a single track. Thanks.